your partner is a part of your motherhood environment in exactly the same way that your housing situation, your financial situation, your childcare situation, your health situation are also part of your motherhood environment as well. It's like, think of it as an ecosystem. So there are different ways that your partner can shape your experience of motherhood. Welcome to the Mama Circle podcast with me, your host, Natalie K. Martin, but please call me Nat. As mums, we know that motherhood is full of magic, but it also comes with hidden costs that honestly we were just not prepared for. Exhaustion, the mental load, the money squeeze, the way our relationships and sense of self get stretched so thin that they almost break. I call this the motherhood debt, and this podcast is a safe, judgment and shame-free zone where we talk about it all. I'm going to be bringing you personal stories, conversations with other moms, and practical tools to help you feel less alone and more supported as you go along this wild roller coaster ride of motherhood. So whether you're joining me on your 2 a.m. night feed, out and about running errands, or cooking dinner for your family, I want you to know that you are doing big and important work. And in case nobody has told you this today, you've got this. So if you're ready, let's jump in. So hello, welcome back for another episode with me, Nat. You're joining me from my car again this week, so welcome. If you're brand new here, this happens a lot. I tend to record in my car, so hi, welcome. If you're returning, I'm glad that you like being in my car with me. I hope that you are all well and having a great week so far. So today's episode, I really want to talk about something that I think is really incredibly important. And I think that it's something that we perhaps don't necessarily think about in as much depth as we should. And that is how our motherhood, our experience of motherhood, is shaped and affected by the person who we have children with or the person who we raise our children with. So it doesn't matter whether it's the biological parent or if it's, you know, like a new love, a new person that comes in, a step parent. That will massively affect the way that we show up and the way that we parent. And I think a lot of us know, like, you don't just want to have kids with anyone, right? But the fact of the matter is that we tend to fall in love with someone, and not all the time. People, you know, start families in many different ways. But for a lot of us, we meet someone, we fall in love, and then we embark on this journey of motherhood. And we're not necessarily really looking for, like, are they father material? You know, obviously you want to make sure that we're with people who are nice people, and in the best case, they've got a job and all those kinds of things. But I think that there are extra layers that we don't really think about. And also, just unfortunately, with a lot of things in terms of motherhood, we don't know how it's going to feel until we're in it. I'm someone who's like that, like with everything. I have ideas about things and, oh, that would be cool. And, oh, I'd like to have that. It was like, I'd love to have a garden. And then I moved somewhere with a garden and was like, I'm not really that good at gardening and I don't really enjoy it. I'm actually quite happy with like a balcony, you know, or like a small terrace or something. And yeah, like, you know, we can have our ideas about what might be important to us and, you know, what things we might be looking for in a partner. But actually, when we're in the thick of it, when we're in those, you know, those parenting moments, the things that we need are perhaps different to things that we thought we might need when we set out. So that's what this episode is really, that's what it's really all about. Like, the partner that you have children with and raise children with will shape your entire motherhood experience. If you've not listened to episode 2, which is all about the importance of your experience of motherhood and how that affects your child or children, as well as inviting you to think about what your experience of what you, as well as inviting you to think about what you would like your experience of motherhood to be. So that's a really good episode to listen to if you haven't already. It's one of the top performing episodes of the podcast so far. It's something that people really resonate with because I think it's, again, something that we don't necessarily think about in detail when we're setting out on this journey of motherhood. I think I also just want to say that if this topic feels a bit like, a bit like bitey for you, you know, it can feel a bit taboo to say these things. And I when I thought about this episode topic, I was like, oh gosh, this could potentially be quite controversial. But I think that's only because we're told that like love is enough. And as nice a sentiment as that is, it just is not. It's not. Love is not enough. You can have all the love in the world, but there are many other circumstances that affect our lives and our lives of the people who we love. We're also told that everyone struggles. And so, you know, we just shouldn't moan because everyone has struggles. Yes, everyone has struggles, but that doesn't lessen what our struggles are. And we're also told not to blame our partners. And I do want to say, this is not about blame. This is not about, you know, if you're someone who has had a pretty rough ride of motherhood so far, and then you're listening to this and you're thinking, yeah, this is all my partner's fault. That's not what this episode is about. It's just to help you kind of reframe and see that with all the will in the world, you could be like the best mum ever. But if you are in a relationship with someone who, I don't even want to say negatively influences your experience of motherhood. For some people that will be very true, but it's not about positive and negative. It's just about understanding that we don't live in silos. And the person who we choose to spend our lives with has a massive, massive, massive impact on our lives. I've seen it floated around, this quote, or this kind of paraphrase of a quote that's not necessarily to do with family life, but just in terms of life. Your future partner will dictate your happiness. I think it's something that, what's his name? The guy, my brain right now is not very good. The old guy, talks a lot about inner child. I want to say Garbo. It's not Garbo. Gabo Mate. Oh my goodness. Yeah, he speaks about this as well, because it's very true. Our partner, our life partner, or the partner who we choose to spend our lives with, we spend the most amount of time with them, right? We build our lives with them. And it's impossible not to be affected by someone who you build your life with, who you maybe live with, who you have children with, who you're intimate with, who you share your deepest, darkest with, who, you know, is there supporting you through life's hardships and ups and downs. It's impossible for that not to happen. We don't live in a vacuum, and motherhood doesn't live in a vacuum. And this is also why you can see two mums who from the outside maybe have like a lot in common. Maybe they have a similar income, similar size house, children are about the same age, all of that kind of things, but can have a very, very, very different experience of motherhood. So when we zoom out a little bit, I think we tend to think that there are certain things that matter when it comes to our experience of motherhood. And that might be, you know, the baby. What is the child like? Which is a very big deal, but it's not the only one. We might also think about the birth and how the birth goes and whether there's any trauma involved in that. We might also think about the mum's personality and whether she's someone who is born to be a mother, whether she's got that maternal instinct. We also tend to think that motherhood is shaped by our ability to cope. All of those things are correct to a certain degree. But what often gets missed is the infrastructure around her. And at the very centre of that is her partner, if she has one. Not everyone does. Some people embark on single parenthood, solo parenthood alone. But for those of us who do have a partner, the partner is a core part of that infrastructure, whether it's the biological parent or not. Your partner is a part of your motherhood environment in exactly the same way that your housing situation, your financial situation, your childcare situation, your health situation are also part of your motherhood environment as well. It's like, think of it as an ecosystem. So there are different ways that your partner can shape your experience of motherhood. And as I said, I think this is something that on some level we think about when we're going through the selection process of dating, because that is what dating is. If we just, you know, like look at it for what it's, you know, what it really is. It is a selection process. And, you know, so we will have things that are on our list that are important to us. And I think that at the core of that, for a lot of people, the most important thing is resonance, connection. Do I feel safe with this person? Do I feel loved by this person? Can I trust this person? All of those things. And they are so important. But there are other things at play here. So you might be someone listening to this who, you're currently thinking about having children, and, you've stumbled across my podcast, or you like listening to it because it's helping you to try and feel like you're prepared for the things about motherhood that you don't see and you don't hear until you're in it. You might be someone who's in a relationship and very happy in your relationship and, with your family life. You might be someone who's struggling, who's potentially considering separation. You might be going through separation. You might be on the other side of separation. No matter where you are on that spectrum, I'm hoping that this is something that can help you just to put things into context, to remove some of the blame, to remove some of the shame, if those things are applicable to you, but also to maybe to help you to look at things with a slightly wider lens if you are on the pre-motherhood side of things. I am not saying that if you're listening to this list and you're like, oh my God, I need to now end my relationship. That's not what this is about. It's just giving you context so that you can be aware. So things that are really important in terms of that motherhood ecosystem when it comes to our partner and how our partner affects us. Emotional regulation and nervous system. I've joked before that a couple of years ago I said to my friend, I can't hear the words nervous system anymore. I'm just so sick of hearing it. I feel like that's all anyone goes on about. Let me tell you, on the other side of motherhood, nervous system and emotional regulation is number one for the mother. But I'm also putting this at the top of the list for the partner as well, biological or non-biological. Is your partner able to self-regulate? Are they able to de-escalate stress? Are they someone who escalates it? There are people who kind of thrive on stressful situations. Is that them? Are you co-regulating them and the child? Being able to self-regulate is so important because A, it just is, good for us as individuals, but B, also because when you can self-regulate, you're not reliant on your partner to do that for you. Note that I'm not talking about co-regulation. Co-regulation is something that can happen just from being in the presence of someone. We all know what it feels like to be with someone who we just feel good with, we just feel safe with, we feel calm with. They are co-regulating you. We also know what it's like to be with someone where we just feel like afterwards and we feel really anxious and tense. That's because they're dysregulated and they are dysregulating our system. In the same way that we help our children to co-regulate by hugging them when they're upset so we are energetic beings, and the energy of other people, their nervous systems, will affect ours. If you are not able to self-regulate, what happens, or if you and your partner, or you or your partner are not able to self-regulate, what happens when children get thrown into the mix is chaos. I shared this thought in the episode, I can't remember the number, where it was a Reddit episode talking about having children decimated my marriage, basically. The reason why that can happen is because we are in a state of dysregulation a lot as mums, especially in the beginning, especially in these toddler years, because it is just so intense and it's chaos, and we're, sleep deprived, and we're not eating properly, dehydrated, all of these things that can throw our nervous system out of balance. We're having hormonal issues. When we are not able to self-regulate as much as possible, we then need to be co-regulated. And if you've got someone who cannot regulate themselves and needs to be co-regulated, they need you to do that for them. And if you are not self-regulated because you're exhausted, because you're, carrying all the mental load, all of these kind of things, that is such a drain on you. It's a drain on your nervous system. It's like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. This is you being empty and then having to co-regulate your child or children, and also having to co-regulate your partner. So, you know, their ability to look after themselves on a nervous system point of view is so important, because they're then able to help pour into your children or your child, but they're also able to help co-regulate you when you need it. In the best case, we'd be two individuals who are totally self-regulated. And that is something that a lot of people experience before having children. They are, you know, able to do the things that fill them up. They're able to spend time with each other and help keep each other balanced. And that's why it can feel so rocky when a child comes into play. So is your partner able to self-regulate? Do they de-escalate stress, or do they add to it? The impact that this can have on you in motherhood means that it can, you know, take you from that feeling of feeling held and supported and like that, oh, really nice, you know, I feel really good around them, to walking on eggshells, to not wanting to blow a situation up just by, you know, mentioning that you had a stressful day, or there's an unexpected bill that's landed on the doormat, and, you know, gosh, how am I going to bring that up? Because, you know, they are just like at the very top of their nervous system. That is something that, you know, really can affect how you feel as a mother going about your business, carrying the mental load that you're carrying. If you feel like you can't rely on your partner, or if you can't rely on your partner to regulate themselves, then your mental load gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And it also means that you go into a state of hypervigilance. And, you know, being very aware, hyper aware of how they're feeling. Do they need to rest? Do they need this? Like, you know, caretaking them, which robs you then of feeling emotionally safe. So are they able to regulate their emotions and also their nervous system? How are they when it comes to the mental load and initiative? I feel like this is something that is like one of the big things that is culturally kind of stereotypical, but honestly is also something that I see and hear among my mum friends as well. Is your partner able to see things that need doing? Do they walk past the washing basket without noticing that it's overflowing? Do they, walk past, do they stand and brush their teeth in a sink that is full of like globs of 3-day-old toothpaste and stuff like that? Do they stuff things into the bin even though it's completely overflowing and stinking? Like, are they able to just see the laundry needs to be done, the washing needs to be done, the dishwasher needs to be emptied, the nappies need refilling? Or do they wait to be told? You know, is it like, oh yeah, sure, I can do it, you just need to tell me? Are they able to take initiative and just see that life needs to be taken care of? Do they take responsibility without praise? Is this someone who is able to just do the thing without needing you to then say, well done for taking out the rubbish, bravo for changing a nappy? Because if they're not, what happens is that you become a manager mum. You become the person who knows everything about your household, who is expected to keep things running and manage an entire household by yourself, instead of being a partner mum, instead of being someone who is a mum, but also a partner in your relationship. And what happens when that mental load gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and, you know, we are constantly taking the initiative, we're not being supported, is that resentment starts to kick in. And resentment, when that kicks in, it can be so insidious, and that can spell the end of your relationship. I can't remember the exact figures now, but I know that the Gottman Institute did like a really, really long-term study, and they were able to predict with, you know, pretty sharp accuracy that for couples where resentment had started to split in, that was the number one predictor of divorce. Because it's really easy to set in, and it snowballs really, really quickly if it's unchecked, if it becomes chronic. And that comes at the expense of shared ownership. If we have a partner who can just see things that are done, or who we've, you know, if we have a partner who can see when things need to be done, or who can take things from us if we sit and we have a conversation and say, I need you to take care of the laundry, I can't do that, and they take it and they own it, then, that is something that's really supportive for us. But if we're dealing with someone who cannot take initiative, who cannot help us with the mental load, that will massively affect the way that we show up, the way that we mother our children, the happiness that we feel, the lightness that we feel, the capacity that we have for ourselves and for our work and for our friends and for our own lives. Another thing that's really important to think about, and this might be one that could feel a little bit unfair, I'm going to say, but I'm just going to say it anyway, is their capacity. Whether that's physical, mental, or emotional. It's very, very nuanced, but it is so important. Physical. If we have a partner who is disabled, for example, it's not their fault that they're disabled. Also, accidents happen, sickness happens, but that also has a really big impact on us. If we have a partner who is not able-bodied, whether that's down to chronic illness, whether it's down to physical impairment, it's not that they can't be a good parent. Of course they can. But it means that there are going to be things that they can't do, right? If we have a partner who is paralyzed for whatever reason, right? While it's terrible that has happened to them, it also means that there are things they can't do. It means that there are things that need to be picked up by you or your support network. Chronic illness, especially the kind of chronic illness that comes in waves, when your partner is experiencing a flare-up, that can take them out for a long time. We might have a partner who is on very heavy medication and, is so not able to, and might be incapacitated for certain periods of time. Neurodivergence is also something to be considered. Again, it doesn't mean that they're not capable of being parents. It just means that it might affect the way that we show up in our lives and the load that we are under. Having a partner who's going through burnout. Burnout is just so common these days. And, I think often we can kind of say, oh, I'm feeling so burnt out. Like, real, true burnout is a lot. It is a lot. I've seen it up close and it is not pretty. And it can take months, if not years, to fully come out of that. So that is something that can affect the way that you mother, especially, when it's a, real burnout, because again, it affects the nervous system and children. Children are big nervous system triggers, right? Addiction. Does your partner have an addiction? Whether that's alcoholism, gambling, anything else, that can also affect how we mother as well. Trauma, do they have trauma that they're working through? Do they have mental health issues? Again, a lot of these things are like, it's not their fault. They're not bad people. But they're things that in coupleship, before we have children, you might very well be able to work around and kind of, quote unquote, compensate for with other things. But when children come into the mix and we're now, busy with parenting and needing that extra support, it is something that can have a really big impact on us. So it is something to be considered. Again, those things are not anyone's individual fault, but it does shape the way that we experience motherhood. That is just a fact. Because the impact of all of that is that you might end up compensating or overcompensating long term, which can then lead to burnout for you and illness in you and stress in you and mental health imbalance in you. And again, don't forget that all of these things, which is what I go into in episode 2, is that the way that we experience motherhood and the stresses that we are under as mothers will have a really big impact on our children. That is scientifically proven. And this is why it sounds so cutthroat, and I don't mean it in this way, but being aware of who we have children with. I don't want to say being selective, because, you know, like someone with a neurodivergency, you wouldn't necessarily be like, well, I'm not going to have children with you because you've got ADHD. That's not what I mean. But being aware of the impact that that can have on you, and just kind of taking our emotional glasses off and just having a very objective set of glasses on. Like that overcompensation, whenever we overcompensate for something goes out of balance, and eventually that system will become overloaded. So we need to just bear that in mind. When motherhood becomes heavier than expected, it can be really difficult for us, and that might be something that we're going into from the very beginning, knowing that our partner has a certain issue. It might be something that happens just as life happens. You know, as I said, people get sick, people have accidents, etc. Another thing to consider is money and your financial philosophies, because as I've explained in the parenting versus, I need to just bookmark in my brain the actual, I think it's episode 42, parenting in 1990 versus parenting in 2025. Money is a big deal. And although, you know, like I'm a romance writer as well, so in my mind I'm like, we can overcome anything and money is just money. And of course, like, you know, you can raise a beautiful family on, you know, the breadline, and money is not the be all and end all, but it is important when we have children, because for a while you might be in the situation of having one income as opposed to two. And I say might because not everyone takes a really long maternity leave. Some people, you know, go straight back to work after 6 weeks, but for a lot of us that income drops and it goes from 1 to 2, or 1 to it goes from 2 incomes to 1, or from 2 incomes to like 1.5 if you go back to working part-time. So do they have a job? What does their job pay? What is the potential income that they will earn over time? It can feel a bit icky to think about it in these terms, but I think that's because we've been taught that like talking about money is bad, and you know, you should never ask what someone earns because that's rude. And all of these things, like, they are very outdated. It is just important to know, like, can we financially afford a child? Like, we need to be able to pay for the roof over our heads. We need to be able to buy food, etc. What is their attitude to spending, to saving, to risk? Is this someone who, you know, does not like to spend money at all? Is perhaps what you could call a bit of a Scrooge. You know, like, that might impact your experience of motherhood, because you might feel like you have to justify every expense every time you buy a new pair of shoes, every time you buy, you know, you need to buy a new winter coat, or the cost of nappies, the cost of groceries, especially if you are in a situation where you're not earning because you're, you know, you're being the parent who's at home looking after the children. It can really do a number on you if you feel like you have to sit and justify every single pound, euro, dollar that you spend in the supermarket, for example. If there's someone who likes to spend, are they going to spend all of the money? You know, like, is there going to be any room for savings? Are they someone who is very high risk? Do they like to invest in risky investments? Do they have gambling addiction? That kind of thing. You know, and who sacrifices their career momentum? It tends to be the mum automatically. As I spoke about in the episode, are you financially independent? Are you financially dependent on your partner? Mums tend to sacrifice their career from just the simple fact of, you know, going through pregnancy and then taking time off to, you know, recover maternity leave, tending to be the ones that go back to work part-time so that, you know, we can be there to look after the kids and pick them up from school and all of that kind of thing. Like, it tends to happen automatically that it's the mum, but it doesn't have to. I know couples where they say the mum will take the first year, the dad will take the second year. And, you know, like, you can also talk about these things. You don't have to just accept that it's going to be you. But is this someone who's open to having those conversations? Is this someone who expects the mum, you, to give up their career and be a stay-at-home mum? This is something that is one of the biggest motherhood debts that we have, because how things play out with your partner, the mindset of your partner around money and their philosophy around money will impact your financial independence. You will either be encouraged to be financially independent, or you may find yourself becoming financially dependent. And that can reduce your choices. You know, if you're not earning any money and you have a partner who is very spending averse and gives you a very, very low allowance to spend on groceries and things like that, reduces your choice. It reduces your choice in where you can go on holiday, what food you buy, what clothes you buy for your children, etc. And as I said before, that can really be a strain on the relationship. So nobody, it's not wrong to be spending averse. You can have two people who have very different philosophies on money. I don't think that's a problem. I think you just have to, be able to talk about it and potentially, just have in your mind already, like, what are their spending habits? What are their saving habits? Because that will impact your experience of motherhood. Their family of origin and the support that's around. So is your partner someone whose family lives far away? Maybe they moved countries. Maybe you moved countries. Do they have a big family? Do they have a small family? It's not to say that having a big family automatically means support, because it doesn't. But, do they have a family who, like the previous episode, This Is Us, do they have siblings? Do they have aunts and uncles, cousins? Do they have people who live nearby? Do they have parents who are willing to support? Do they have a family that's very fragmented? Are they estranged? Is there a lot of family drama? Because all those things will impact you. It'll be very difficult for you to not be pulled into the drama of the family, or, the closeness of the family. Do they come with practical help? Do they come with boundary issues? These are things that we have no control over. We have no control over our own family. So we definitely don't have control over our partner's family as well. But it is something important to consider, right? If let's say that you both live in the UK, but your partner comes from Singapore, that means potentially that part of your motherhood experience is going to mean spending, maybe significant chunks of time abroad. It might also mean that, there might be significant chunks of time where your partner's family might want to come and stay with you for a little while, right? It's just understanding their ecosystem and what effect that might have on you and your family. Again, helpful grandparents or in-laws, as opposed to in-laws who have boundary issues or, maybe come with their own drama. Is it that they are coming with a potential village, potential support system, or are they coming completely by themselves? And again, it's not a judgment on your partner. Some people choose to estrange themselves from their family for their mental health. And they decide, my family is toxic, I don't want to have anything to do with them. And it, good for them. But it does mean that in terms of your relationship and your family, i.e. you, your partner, your child, your children, that there will not be that familial support from their side. It's just something to be aware of. And lastly, their values, their vision, what they envision family life to be like. What do they think parenting is? What do they think about things like discipline? Are they authoritarian? Do they want to do gentle parenting? What are their thoughts on screen times, on vaccinations, on schooling? Are they like, I want my child to be homeschooled? Are they, I want my child to absolutely go to private school and go to boarding school and be away for most of the year? What are their thoughts on gender roles? Are they very traditional? Do they want to be the breadwinner while you stay at home? Like, these are things that ideally we would kind of have a good understanding of before we have children. And you might think, well, I've been with this person for like 7 years. We've been together for 4 years or whatever. I know them really well. I can tell you that there are some things that are just not, they don't come up like until you have children. Have you sat, if you haven't had children already, like, have you sat and spoken about what your stance is on vaccinations? Are they someone who's completely anti-vaccine? They might be. You know, I feel like the pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic, really brought this to the forefront of everyone's minds, whereas before, you know, being anti-vaccine or pro-vaccine was something that was really only spoken about, you know, maybe in the medical world or the world of parents. And then the pandemic came along and suddenly everyone was talking about it because, you know, for some of us, you were not able to go to a cafe if you were not vaccinated. You couldn't travel. You couldn't, I don't know, go into a hospital maybe. And so it feels like the topic of vaccinations is something that, you know, people really talk about now. You know, if there were to be another pandemic situation, is this someone who would refuse to send their child to school if they needed to be vaccinated, right? Just as an example. What kind of life are you building together? Because again, I think a lot of us, we meet someone, we fall in love, we know that we've maybe got similar goals, similar hobbies, but actually, like, are we sitting down and speaking about what do we envision our life to be together? What family life do we want to have? Are we pulling in the same direction? Because if you're not, if there are big incompatibilities, or you just have very different ideas about things, you know, if you're with someone who wants to go and surf, you know, on a beach all day, while you're like, I'm a total city girl, like, I want to build my career, that's not particularly very compatible. And you might be able to get around it before you've got children. Maybe your partner goes surfing, like, you know, on surf holidays all the time, or maybe you're lucky enough to live somewhere where you can surf and also have like the big city life. I don't know, California maybe, or Sydney maybe. That's somewhere that maybe springs to mind. But when you've got children, like, is that going to be okay? Are they going to be okay with not being able to go surfing every day? Like, these are things that can cause like a constant low grade conflict. So being aware and having those conversations about actually, like, what do we want from our lives and are we aligned on that? Because that can also massively impact how you experience motherhood. Remember that, you know, when you look at mums who seem to be doing so well, I don't know how she does it. Oh my gosh, they're having another one. I can hardly cope with one. There are things at play in the background that you maybe aren't seeing, like the capacity of their partner, like whether they have an aligned partnership or not, like whether they're, you know, having to stand in a lot for a partner who is, you know, otherwise incapacitated, or even something else that I didn't actually put on that list, which is actually quite important, is how their partner works. If you've got a partner who works, you know, away a lot of the time, let's say that you've got a partner who works on an oil rig, or who, you know, works on a cruise ship and is away like 6 months of the year. Like, people don't just work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. They also work shifts. They, you know, they have certain jobs that means that they are away from the home a lot. That will also be a really big impact as well. If all of this, as I said in the beginning, if all of this is hitting close to home and you're feeling like, oh my God, this is a reflection. Remember, this is not something to panic about. I don't want you to feel disempowered by this. I don't want you to feel a sense of despair about this. But just, you know, the whole point here is just for you to feel a little bit more aware. Like, what feels heavy because of your partner's limits? Where are you maybe, you know, taking on those limits as your own? as opposed to understanding that they're coming from your partner's side without putting any blame or shame or judgment on it. Where might you be overcompensating? What support are you missing that you maybe just assumed might be there, And also, probably crucially, what is changeable and what isn't? There are certain things that can be changed, like, the mental load and how we distribute that. Potentially the job, if they have a job where they're away a lot, maybe there might need to be a conversation about them finding a job that's closer to home or with more child-friendly hours. But there are certain things that can't be changed, like, whether they have a disability or, something like that. And I think it's really important to know that there are some things that you can get external support for, right? The village is not just grandparents and cousins and aunties and neighbours. The village, as you will hear in a future episode that is coming very soon, can also include cleaners, nannies, au pairs for those people who have that money, or, there's a lot of support that can be brought in from external circumstances. Lots of things can be renegotiated. And honestly, some things just require grief. They require grieving. They require just awareness of understanding, like, okay, this is where we're at. I'm with my partner. This is where they're at. This is the impact it's having on my motherhood. And it's okay to grieve that without necessarily needing to feel like you've got to fix it. On the flip side of that, if you're someone who is right now choosing a partner or you're already questioning things, this is... Love matters, right? It really, really does. But capacity and values and willingness matter just as much. This is not about finding a perfect partner, right? It's just about going into it with eyes wide open, understanding that the things that you choose, the partner that you choose, has an effect on you in the same way that you will have an effect on their fatherhood. It goes in both directions because it isn't about blame. This is not fathers are bad, partners are bad. Like, it is what it is. We all come with what we come with. And there probably are things that your partner compensates for that you are not able to do as well, right? Like, so don't feel like you now have to be like, oh my God, I'm going to leave my partner, or I shouldn't have children with this person because, of all of these things. No, just reflect on it, right? Just reflect on it and go into things with your eyes wide open. I just want to reiterate that, again, if your experience of motherhood right now feels harder than you thought, it doesn't mean you're failing. It never means you're failing. Whether we're talking about how our partners impact things, or whether it's, just how we've managed to move through the day, right? It does not mean you're failing, ever. But it might mean that the support around you isn't what you thought it might be. It wasn't what you expected it to be. And that is okay, right? The first step is always just becoming aware, because we tend to pile on like blame and shame and judgment and criticism towards ourselves. Like, I'm a bad mom, I should be able to do this, I'm not maternal enough, etc., etc. And actually that's just not always true. It's very rarely true. So just becoming aware of things can often help just take the pressure off, to be honest, right? So I really hope that episode has been interesting for you. Like, if you need to maybe just sit with it and let it kind of percolate, like, that is okay. And just, again, remember that, like, everybody, we're doing the best that we can, right? And some people will just have more things that they have to deal with that will have a more challenging impact on their motherhood than others. That is just... it's just life. This is not about assigning blame or shame or becoming martyrs or anything else. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. You can always reach me by email, info@nataliekmartin.com. I love getting emails, so please do feel free. It might take a minute to get back to you, but please do feel free to email. This is a topic that I think a lot of us need to really think about more. You can also drop me a DM over on Instagram at natalie.kmartin. I hope that you enjoyed, and thank you as always for being here with me in my car. I'm going to drive home now. I wish you a really, really, really lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you back here for the next episode.